Welcome to another episode of Shaving with Douglas Cutlery. Today there's not going to be any, other than the background music you're hearing, it's not going to be a music video, it's not going to be a trick video. Today we're going to be dead serious because we're talking about how to learn to shave your head. I've had several people ask me to do this video on how I learned to do it. And I'm going to show y'all every trick I've learned. And I got to say before I start, every trick I've learned isn't necessarily the tricks that you're going to use, but it is a good starting point. Now, if you wanted to, you could just jump in and go after your head with a straight razor, but I don't recommend it. I mean, practice first. Even with the practice, you're still in, like anything else you're learning to do with a straight, you're going to nick yourself every once in a while, but you can minimize the damage by practicing first and getting your hand and arm to learn the movements. It's like learning a golf stroke. It's called muscle memory. And that's what you really want, is the muscle memory. You want your hand to know what it's doing so that you don't really mess up bad. Now, here is the tool for the trick. It's just a plain, simple butter knife with a clothespin clipped on 5 inches from the end. That's usually where the pivot point on a straight razor is. So you want the clothespin there so that you get a proper grip. And it should leave you about 2.5 to 3 inches outside the end of your fingers. Now, you can, if you already own your straight razor, measure where the pivot point is and, move it to where it matches what you're going to be using. But first thing, you want one of these. You can buy these at Walmart or wherever your favorite store is. I happen to get mine at a flea market. It's just an extendable mirror and it's held in place. Now, this is the smallest one that you would want to use. And to adjust that mirror, I'll try to get in the mirror where it looks in film. Okay, if you can see the back of my ear in the mirror right there. And if I turn my head, you can see the back of my other ear. Now, I'm not tall enough to, well, there it is right there. You want the top of your head in the top of the mirror and your neckline in the bottom of the mirror. Now, the reason for the butter knife is it simulates the weight and the size of a straight razor, and you got a nice straight dull edge to practice with. And what you want to do is just simply do what you would do with a straight razor. You want to remove the lather. Now, this is not a new technique. This is actually, you see it in comedy movies sometimes with the Three Stooges where they're showing them in barber school and they're shaving a balloon. It's basically the same thing. You're learning and practicing the strokes in a way that you're not going to cut yourself. Now, one of the other things that you need to be aware of is feel around on the back of your head. Right here on my head, I have a crease. That right there is my problem area. Because when I come down with the razor, if you're looking in the mirror, follow my finger down. When I hit that crease, the razor wants to catch on the bottom side of the crease. So you want to especially practice right here in the crease of coming into it gently and then rocking the razor out of it with that little hand movement right there. So that what you're doing is you're cutting the top of the crease, but not cutting into the flesh. You're just cutting the hair off of it, and then the razor rolls on down onto the rest of the flesh. Up here in the back of your head, on the crown, you want to feel of the bone structure because there's probably a crease right there too. That's one of those in your skull, the ridges where the skull's knitted together. And I've said it before, the skin on your head is naturally tight. So you want to know where all of those bumps are. Find them in your head. And the easiest way to find them is with that butter knife. And it'll also teach you all the strokes, so that every time you reach behind your head, your hand automatically goes to the right place. Now, today's razor is G511. It's virtually identical to the G506. And this is a really nice razor. It's a heavy 8/8. It's a very slight smile. I don't recommend a smile for shaving your head because it just makes more work for you, because you're going to cut smaller paths. But as you can see, with my natural grip, that at 5 inches, it's basically the same thing. And the only reason for the clothespin is because without it, it doesn't feel like a straight razor. So do use it. Some of the grips that you will end up using is the standard grip. You may end up using the knife grip, which is with the thumb in the thumb notch, one finger on the back of the blade, and your fingers draped over the blade. One of the strokes that you need to learn is the pivot stroke. And you place one finger, it can be, if you want to do a short one, it'll be the forefinger, a medium stroke, it's the middle finger, a longer stroke. But one of these 3 fingers will be the pivot. And what you're doing is you're just turning the razor around that point so that the stroke does like this. It's a way to get extra control of the razor without slicing. That's the important thing about any straight razor, whether it's your face or your head. You don't want to ever slice. If you're pulling in 2 directions, you're going to slice. But if you've got an anchor point like a finger and you're twisting around it, there is no slicing motion. See, it's a straight cut. And that's the ideal, because slice will cut your skin, because then it quits being a shear and starts being a knife. So you need to watch out for that when you're learning. And with your hand behind your head, it's very easy. I'm just trying to keep this lather wet while we're talking. It's very easy to end up getting confused in the mirror and slicing. So another reason to practice with that, because if you'll see any hard spots where you have difficulty pulling straight down, you'll see the slice in the lather, because you'll see something like that. If you look in the mirror, you'll see that angle where when you use the butter knife, I'll just go ahead and do it with the butter knife. If you pull down like that and then you end up slicing across, see how that stroke curves right here? That's what you're looking for. That's your problem area with your arm if you see that. So you want to practice on those spots. If it means you have to use 2 strokes there, that's fine. But whatever you do, you want to have learned to not do that, because you will cut yourself. And when you cut your head, it's a bloody mess. Okay, I always start as far around as I can reach. What I'm trying to do is I try to line up the point where it comes down behind my ear, about a stroke away from my ear, and just pull straight down. That is my starting point. Now, I've been doing it long enough that I don't really have to. I've showed it in my first videos a lot. I'll take a knuckle and put it against my scalp, so that when I pull, you see the soap on the end of the finger there? That finger was guiding the blade so that the angle didn't change. And you can see right there why I don't normally use a smiling blade on my head. It just means you have to go back and pick up more. But watching in the mirror and using either a finger or a knuckle to try to guide the blade's angle, and just pull it straight down. Now, here's where I was talking about that dent, that crease. And see, I'm going to exaggerate it a little. Then when I get in it, I pull out. Now I don't pull out that far. My actual stroke, it's a very gentle pull. It's like that right there. It's just a slight turn. Just enough to get the razor to crawl out of the crease without cutting the skin. Just like that. Now you're always going to wind up, unless you use two mirrors and you shave two-handed, which I've never been able to do. I'm useless with my left hand. You're going to end up with a blind spot. There's always on my head two strokes that are virtually blind. That's the last one I can see right there. When I get further than that, I can't turn my eyes or my head far enough to see what the razor is doing. So you kind of have to trust yourself. Another reason you want to practice with the butter knife is so that you can learn to trust that blind stroke. Now this is where that pivot stroke comes in. You take your ear, and unfortunately for me, this is the blind side. Pull your ear forward, gently set the razor where it's right behind your ear, set up the pivot stroke, and then pivot. And it will clean right behind the ear. And then come across the top of your ear. Now, if you're buying a razor for you to learn with on your head, don't get a Spanish point. Get a round point. That way, it'll keep the cutting edge away from the skin at the top of your ear. Right there is a very easy place to get a nick, and a round point will stop that from happening. See, I can move my ear out of the way and I can clean up some of that blind spot because now I can see it in the front mirror. Okay, now the other side, I always clean over the ear first. Now, here I use the flat of my thumb as a guide. And it maintains the angle of the blade as I come across. Back of the ear. On this side, I can see in the mirror, so I don't have to use a pivot stroke on it. Although when I do the second pass, I will. Now, if you're used to using like a double edge, you're probably used to pulling up. I've never had great success and way too many nicks trying to use a straight razor pulling up on the back of my head. Now the rest of it I clean front to rear. This is fairly simple because you're looking at it in the front mirror. Again, with a smiling blade, it's a little more difficult because you have to take smaller paths. And the reason for that is actually very simple. If you look at the smiling blade, it's curving away from your head. There's only a small little contact with a smiling blade when you're shaving your head. I can go ahead and do this, but see, I've got my arm at a very precarious position. So I'll go ahead and clean this, stroking down. And once I get around to there, I'm back into the mirror. Clean up the small little patches that we missed. Okay. Another important trick to remember. After your first pass, take your cloth or your towel or whatever you use and clean it off, all of it. The reason is, if you're cutting any kind of length of hair at all, when you start covering it up with lather, if you happen to stick that razor on top of a cut hair, it will jump when it starts to cut, especially if it's right in the center of the contact. The razor will slide off of the hair and jump down into your skin. It's an easy way to get a small nick, but I avoid every nick I can. Now, it's not like face shaving where you have with the grain and then against the grain. You can if you want to go to that extreme, but I've never found it necessary because the skin is so tight, and if your razor is sharp enough, then you're cut down to the skin on the first pass. But what you need to do when you're first learning, you'll end up with stripes in your hair because you're not getting it even. The way you even it is to go across the grain. And I always start over the mirror side ear and slowly, maintaining the angle, go all the way around. One smooth pass. And come down below the ear. And do one smooth pass all the way to the back of the other ear. And then at the neckline. Now see, there's where those creases come in. You see that you're not going to get that razor down in that crease. Right, here's see if I can. At the neckline, see there's where I didn't get the lather out of the crease. Go in there and clean the crease. And then the top, same thing. Maintaining that angle all the way around. Now, fortunately, that's all I have to even up. I don't have hardly anything left up here. Really, the only thing I'm cutting up here is a few little scragglers. So at this point, I'll just run it again to make sure I got all of them. And if you feel the razor grab, don't pull. Stop. Do not go back to the same angle on it again because you have bit into the skin. If you go back, for example, let me show you. If I'm pulling this way and I feel the razor dig in and stop, I'm not going to continue to force it. That'll dig into the skin. I'm going to stop, pull the razor back out, change the angle, and go across it. Because you've got a small nick in the skin that's not bleeding, that's fine. But you don't want to try to pull the razor through there again or it'll fall back in the same groove and it will cut you. Now just gently doing a little trim work. Just like that. And give it a nice rinse. It's really fairly simple. I do it one-handed. Some people do it two. That's the basics. That's how I learned to do it. It may not be how you learn to do it. What you need to do is find the way that works best for you. So, there it is, head shaving the Douglas Cutlery way. And I do use aftershave on my head. It's best because you don't want any kind of bumps or infections, and you are opening the pores up. So a little bit of aftershave, and we're ready for our day.